Next New Year's, my parents invited me again. Clean slate, they said. I stared at the message for a long moment, remembering every year I had been erased, every empty chair, every carefully worded group text, every smile hiding judgment. I replied, I'm open to rebuilding, but not at a table where I had to disappear to keep the peace. That night, I hosted my own dinner. Not for tradition, not for approval, for me. Friends, colleagues, people who didn't need me to feel smaller to feel comfortable. People who saw the work I'd done, the risks I'd taken, the company I'd built from a cramped shared office above a bar into something real. At midnight, I was on my balcony. Chicago lights blinked below like 1,000 tiny promises. Glasses clinked, laughter bubbled around me, and then a text from my brother. One photo, one empty chair at my parents' table. No caption, just space. That space spoke louder than any apology ever could. It was an acknowledgement, not reconciliation, not reward, just truth. Because here's what I learned. The real power isn't in proving them wrong. It no longer needs their permission. It's in standing tall in your own life, regardless of who notices or doesn't. For years, I thought the strongest move would be dramatic revenge. Walk in, expose secrets, demand apologies, take the table back by force. But life doesn't need theatrics. Life rewards quiet persistence, integrity, and patience. My brother, once the golden child, had to face reality for the first time. He had to earn his place on his own terms, not because I punished him, not because I withheld opportunities, because fairness and accountability were non-negotiable. Sometimes the strongest move isn't reclaiming your seat. It's building a new table and deciding carefully, deliberately, who deserves to sit there. Because that's where respect lives. Not in the approval of those who underestimated you, underestimated your worth, or tried to shrink you to make themselves comfortable. I looked around my table that night. People who had fought their own battles, chased their own dreams, and chosen to stand up for themselves. The conversation flowed easily. The wine poured. The confetti from a small balcony popper fell across the table like a quiet celebration of survival. I realized, finally, that I didn't need their validation, that I didn't need to fight for a seat that had been withheld, that the years of exclusion, of silent dinners, of smiles hiding judgment, had not broken me. They had built me. I was CEO. I had made decisions. I had created opportunities. I had influence, authority, and a table of my own making. And in that space between my table and the empty chair at theirs, I understood something essential. Power isn't revenge. Power is presence. Power is clarity. Power is choosing the people, the conversations, and the battles that actually matter. My parents, they'll always have their version of reality, their version of peace, and that's fine. I don't need to inhabit it anymore. My brother, he's learning to navigate the world on his own, learning that charm and legacy only carry you so far. The rest comes from effort, accountability, and integrity. And me, I finally sit fully at my own table, confident, whole, seen. So I ask you this, if you were in my place, would you go back? Would you take that old seat hoping for approval or reconciliation? Or would you finally choose your own peace? Sometimes the best revenge, the truest power, is not watching others fall. It's building a life so solid, so deliberate, so full of your own worth that no one can move you around the board anymore. It's choosing your own table and deciding who truly deserves a seat. Because the world will always try to shrink you. The world will always ask you to disappear to keep someone else comfortable. But this one truth remains. You don't have to. You never did. You only had to build your own space, invite the right people, and finally, take your seat without apology. And that is exactly what I did. Nobody yelled at me. Nobody disowned me. They just smiled, lowered their voices, and said, "Can you keep the peace this year?" And just like that, I disappeared from my own family. 2 days before New Year's, my phone rang. Chicago, winter evening, the kind that seeps into your bones. I answered. It was my mother. Calm, polished, sweet the way she always was when delivering bad news. "Your brother thinks it might be less awkward if you sit this one out," she said. Sit what out? New Year's dinner. The one night of the year meant for family. The night for laughter, shared memories, and warmth. The night when my name should have belonged at the table. She explained it gently, carefully. He was stressed with BA applications, internships, and expectations. She described it as if it were a favor for him, a courtesy. My father chimed in from the background, voice low, tired, resigned. "Don't make this about you. It's just one dinner." Just one dinner. That's how people erase you, minimizing the moment while ignoring the pattern, the years of subtle omissions, the quiet exclusions that stack until you're almost invisible. Before we hung up, she said the line I'd heard my whole life. "Can't you just be the bigger person?" In our family, that phrase carried a clear message. Be quiet, be agreeable, make everyone else comfortable, even if it comes at the cost of your own presence, your own voice, your own joy. So, I stayed home. I microwaved leftover pasta in my tiny apartment, the hum of the refrigerator echoing in the quiet. I sat alone on the floor, laptop open, pretending spreadsheets and half-charged devices were more important than the empty chair I should have occupied. I didn't cry. I didn't call a friend. I just stared at my phone, scrolling through the family group chat as images rolled in. Champagne glasses clinked. My brother was at the center of every photo, arms around my parents, smiles so wide they looked painted on. And me? Not even a mention. Not even a thought. What my parents never mentioned is what happened a few weeks earlier. My brother had sent me an ethics paper for his MBA program. The subject line was casual, friendly. Just a quick polish. Can you help? But it wasn't just a quick polish. It was plagiarism. Sentences copied verbatim from an online source I had read years before. Paragraphs rearranged, names changed, but the structure, the core, was identical. I looked at the document, and I looked at my brother. I could feel the familiar tension tighten in my chest, the old story repeating itself. I refused. "You're being dramatic," he laughed. "Everyone does this." I told him again. "No, you need to do the work yourself. This is cheating." Then the anger came, the sharp edge I hadn't felt in a while. "You're just jealous. Mom and Dad are finally proud of me for once. You've always had it easy. You always land on your feet." I froze, staring at the screen. My words hung in the cold apartment air. And I realized he wasn't just asking for help. He was rewriting the narrative, framing me as the obstacle, the villain in his story. That night, he told my parents his version. By the time New Year's Eve arrived, the story was settled. He wasn't crossing lines. I was difficult. I was dramatic. I was the one making waves. So when the photos started filling the family group chat, my brother in the center, my parents smiling beside him, champagne and gold streamers and carefully arranged plates, I wasn't surprised. I wasn't even mentioned. Not in the captions, not in the comments. Invisible. The second year, there was no phone call at all. No soft explanation, no request framed as keeping the peace. Just a text. We're keeping it small this year. The third year, exclusion wasn't painful anymore. The sting had dulled. The sharp ache had softened into something else. Quiet acceptance. I didn't need permission to exist in my own family because they'd made it clear I didn't. It didn't matter in the version of family they were crafting, a narrative built around the golden child, the one who needed protection, the one whose comfort came first. But there was something else simmering quiet and unseen. While they were busy celebrating my brother's potential, I was quietly learning lessons they hadn't realized I was capable of. Lessons in patience, in endurance, in seeing the bigger picture. Lessons in noticing the subtle currents of power, influence, and narrative.
I could have shouted, I could have demanded recognition, I could have confronted my parents at the table, insisted they see me, see the work, see the effort I poured into every part of my life that wasn't theirs to witness. But I didn't. Instead, I chose silence. I chose to build my life in the spaces they ignored, to cultivate influence where they hadn't thought to look, to let the slow burn of achievement outpace the fleeting approval of a family who had already decided my place at the table. Before the microwaved pasta and stared at the empty chair that would never have my name, I had already begun that quiet, unseen work. Not out of spite, not out of resentment, but out of necessity, because if the family table wasn't mine, I would create my own. And in that quiet, cold apartment, surrounded by half-charged laptops and stacks of paper, I promised myself one thing. I would never be invisible again.
What my family didn't realize was that while they were celebrating my brother's potential, I was quietly building something of my own, something that wouldn't need their approval, something that couldn't be ignored. Bridgepoint Capital started as an idea scribbled on a napkin in a shared office above a bar. Cheap coffee, flickering fluorescent lights, and the kind of music from downstairs that rattled the ceiling tiles every Friday night. No one believed it could work. Most days, I wasn't even sure I could. I pitched investors who told me I was impressive, only to fund men with weaker ideas and worse numbers. I maxed out credit cards. I sold my car. I worked nights so long that my laptop screen blurred into exhaustion and hope all at once. I ate instant noodles so often that I could feel the salt on my tongue long after it was gone. Meanwhile, my parents didn't ask how I was doing. They never called to see how the company was shaping up. Instead, if Bridgepoint came up at family gatherings, it was always, "We don't really understand what you do, but good for you," followed by a pivot back to my brother's GPA, his interviews, his future. The contrast was sharp. The family I was supposed to be a part of celebrated potential. I celebrated execution. I celebrated the grind. I celebrated the quiet victories no one could see because they weren't photogenic. By the third New Year's, Bridgepoint Capital was no longer a dream. We had revenue, customers, a small but growing team of people who believed in what we were building, people who depended on me for leadership, guidance, and clarity. And then, without press releases, without announcements, without anyone clinking glasses in my honor, I became CEO. It wasn't a title handed down by inheritance or favor. It wasn't even noticed by the people who mattered most at home. It was the result of hundreds of late nights, difficult calls, failed pitches, and endless calculations. It was proved that authority could be built silently, without anyone at the dinner table noticing. I learned the power of quiet influence, the subtlety of control, the way decisions made in your own domain carry consequences far beyond the people watching. I learned to let the work speak, to let the foundation grow, to let the company become bigger than my absence from the family table. And in that growth, I realized something vital. I didn't need permission to matter. I didn't need approval to be seen. I didn't need their recognition to validate my success. I had leverage, real leverage, the kind you can't gift or demand, the kind you earn in silence while everyone else is distracted by appearances. Bridgepoint became more than a company. It became a statement, a living proof that I could create impact and authority in a world that often overlooked women, often overlooked the quiet ones, the overworked ones, the responsible ones, the ones forced to be invisible so others could shine. I watched as my brother navigated life on the assumption that potential was enough, that charm and family favor were the keys to opportunity. Meanwhile, I learned that influence, preparation, and execution mattered far more, that competence built structures that no favoritism could shake, that authority earned in silence couldn't be stolen by anyone, not even family. And so I grew, carefully, methodically, with the patience of someone who had nothing to prove to those who had already decided my story. I made mistakes, yes. I stumbled, I faced rejection, but every time I learned. Every time I built a little more. Every time I reclaimed a fraction of power that had been quietly denied to me for years. By the third New Year's Eve rolled around, I was ready.
Not for confrontation, not for revenge, not to prove anything to the family that had excluded me. I was ready to see the payoff of patience, of hard work, of choosing strategy over emotion. 2 days before that third New Year's Eve, I was accidentally added to a private family Facebook group. I shouldn't have looked, but I did. Under a photo of my brother in a suit, my mother wrote, "Once Ryan lands that job at Bridgepoint, everything will be okay. Olivia just doesn't get family the way he does." Later, in a shaky video from their New Year's toast, I heard my father joke, "As long as HR doesn't run into Liv, he'll be fine." They were planning his future at my company. They just didn't know it yet. And that's when it hit me. I didn't need revenge. I already had leverage. The kind of leverage that doesn't scream or storm through doors. The kind that waits silently, prepared, built on competence, strategy, and quiet authority. The kind that leaves people who underestimated you standing at the threshold, realizing too late that the world isn't what they thought it was. I closed my laptop and leaned back in my chair. Chicago winter pressed against the windows. The apartment was quiet, except for the hum of the heating and the faint sound of traffic below. I didn't need to react. I didn't need to announce my triumph. I didn't even need my parents to notice. The work, the foundation, the company, it was enough. It existed. And one day they would see it, whether they liked it or not. That's the difference between the golden child and the silent builder. One seeks validation, the other creates reality. One waits for the table to be included, the other builds a table that nobody can ignore. By the third New Year's Eve came around, I was no longer the girl who disappeared. I was the woman who quietly decided her own power, who quietly controlled the boardrooms, the investments, the team that depended on me. I was no longer subject to family narratives. I was the author of my own. And for the first time, I felt something new. Anticipation, not resentment. Because what had taken me years to build in silence would soon collide with the very people who thought my absence was permanent. Not with anger, not with revenge, but with authority. The kind that can't be argued with, can't be minimized, can't be ignored. The day my brother walked into our headquarters for his interview, I watched from my corner office, coffee untouched, a calendar open to the date circled 3 months ago. He didn't know it yet, but this building, these walls, the very air he was breathing, it all belonged to me. To him, I was just another executive on the panel, someone he didn't notice, someone whose existence didn't challenge his narrative. He had spent years believing that charm, family favor, and the occasional shortcut were enough to get him ahead. He didn't realize that competence and quiet preparation were a different kind of power entirely. HR led him through the polished lobby, past the open offices buzzing with focused energy, the screens displaying our projects, the teams we'd built from scratch. He smiled politely at everyone, unaware that his footsteps echoed on floors I had designed, in a space I had built. And then, just before the formal interview began, HR said, calmly, almost casually, "Before we start, I'd like you to meet our CEO." He turned. Our eyes met. I didn't speak, I didn't gesture, I didn't betray recognition. I simply sat, letting the moment land. And land it did. His confidence, the kind that had carried him through family dinners, college, and MBA interviews, evaporated. For the first time, he couldn't rely on smiles or charm. There were no parents to minimize him, no mother to call him special, no father to excuse every misstep. The authority in the room wasn't performative. It was real, and it was mine. The interview began. His answers were polished, rehearsed, but shallow. Confidence is built on approval, not competence, and his approval had always been borrowed from family, from friends, from moments where he was the golden child. He didn't realize that real authority, the kind that moves people and resources, doesn't depend on permission. When I asked how he handled ethical pressure, he smiled nervously, leaned back, and said, "I try not to ruin the mood. Keep things smooth. Don't make waves." The words hit me like a cold wind. That same logic had pushed me out of family gatherings for years. That same logic had masked manipulation as keeping the peace. I didn't react. I didn't chastise him. I didn't smile. I didn't scowl. I let the interview unfold as it should, with facts and professionalism carrying the weight that charm never could. I asked about past leadership challenges. He spoke of people he had managed without really managing, of tasks delegated with no accountability, of results taken by others while he smiled for the credit. Every anecdote revealed the gap between potential and reality, between charm and skill. When it came to problem solving under pressure, he froze. He stumbled over a question about handling client conflict, a scenario where Bridgepoint's reputation and millions of dollars were at stake. I didn't intervene. I didn't give him a lifeline. I simply watched quietly as the contrast between our experiences became undeniable. One of us had built something from nothing, night after night, while the other had relied on inherited confidence and parental stories. And then came the final question. How would you lead a team that doesn't recognize your authority? He laughed nervously. I guess I'd rely on charm, try to motivate people, keep things pleasant. I let the silence stretch. The hum of the office, the faint clicks of keyboards, the distant sound of a printer. It all amplified the weight of his answer. He was trying to navigate a world built on substance with the tools of performance, and it wasn't working. After the interview, I excused myself and spoke with HR privately. He's not ready, I said. HR nodded. He's charming, but you're right, not ready for this level. I didn't reject him out of spite. I didn't punish him for years of favoritism or family drama. I didn't want revenge. I wanted honesty. I wanted accountability. But I offered him something real, a junior role. No shortcuts, no family protection, a chance to learn, to earn, to prove himself in the real world, not the one he had been coddled in. He called it unfair. I called it honest, because growth doesn't come from rescue. Growth comes from responsibility, from facing challenges you're not ready for and rising anyway. And for years, my brother had been insulated from that truth. Leaving the office that evening, I felt a calm I hadn't felt in years. There was no satisfaction in seeing him humbled, no gloating, no vindictive thrill, just a quiet understanding that the work I had done, the company I had built, and the authority I had earned could not be diminished by favoritism, family expectations, or narrative. Power, I realized, isn't about being louder than everyone else. It's about being ready when the moment demands it. About having leverage in the one arena that actually matters. About showing up prepared, competent, and unshakable, while others wait for permission that will never come. Later, when he texted my mother about the interview, I heard through the grapevine. Liv, she's intimidating. I didn't know she had done all this. And that was enough. Because the confrontation wasn't about proving him wrong. It wasn't about the family dinners, the old patterns, or even my mother's subtle comments. It was about reality meeting expectation, about the skill meeting narrative, about competence meeting charm. I had built my world quietly, patiently, while they rehearsed scripts and celebrated potential. And now, when those worlds collided, I didn't need to shout. I didn't need to claim a seat at their table. I simply let them arrive at the truth on their own. The golden child had walked into the lion's den, unaware that the lion had already built the kingdom. And for the first time in years, I felt a strange mix of vindication and serenity. Because this wasn't revenge, it was leverage, the kind that lasts, the kind that doesn't need applause, the kind that shapes reality itself. After the interview, I walked back to my office, letting the hum of the headquarters wash over me. My brother sat in a junior meeting room, scrolling his phone nervously, unaware that every detail of his performance had already been evaluated. He had come expecting a shortcut, a nod from family influence, a seat at the table because that's what he had always believed. I didn't call him out. I didn't need to. I had watched the truth unfold with perfect clarity, and the lesson was already seared into the room. Charm only works when competence supports it. HR asked if I wanted to take further steps. I paused. Could I push him out entirely? Make him regret every New Year's dinner where I had been sidelined? Every glance that minimized me? Every subtle dismissal? The temptation was there. It was sharp. It was visceral. And then I remembered something my mentor once told me during the earliest, darkest nights of Bridgepoint Capital. Power isn't punishment. Power is the space you create for truth to operate. Control the environment, not the people. That advice echoed in my mind. I didn't reject him out of spite. I didn't save him out of guilt. I didn't need to orchestrate humiliation to feel victory. I simply told HR the facts. He isn't ready for this role, but he can start here, on a junior team. No shortcuts, no family protection. The opportunity to learn, earn, and prove himself. Honestly. HR nodded. Relief, curiosity, and respect flickered across her face. She had seen countless executives make decisions driven by ego, revenge, or misplaced loyalty. This was different. This was maturity. Later, I sent a brief message to my brother. You have a chance to learn. Take it seriously. No family favors, no expectations beyond your effort. Earn it. The text hit him like a gust of cold air. A pause, then a reply. This feels unfair. I didn't respond. I didn't need to, because fairness isn't about comfort. Fairness is truth, and truth doesn't require justification. That night, I reflected on the past 3 years. The dinners I had missed, the family photos I wasn't in, the invisible role I had played. It had stung, but the sting had fueled something deeper than resentment. It had fueled preparation. While they rehearsed narratives and appearances, I had built skills, teams, a company, and authority. I realized that the true measure of power wasn't proving anyone wrong. It wasn't making them recognize me or feel small. It was that the leverage I had accumulated didn't need validation from anyone else. My seat at the table wasn't inherited, it was earned. And it didn't matter if they saw it yet. The next New Year's Eve, my parents reached out. Clean slate, my mother said. I paused. Could I go back? Could I sit at that same table, the one that had made me invisible for years, and smile politely while old patterns lingered beneath the champagne and small talk? I replied with calm certainty. I'm open to rebuilding, but not at a table where I had to disappear to keep the peace. I've built my own table now. That night, I hosted my own dinner. Friends, colleagues, people who valued my presence not because they had to, but because they wanted to. People who didn't need me smaller to feel comfortable. We toasted over wine, laughter, and shared stories. The table was lively, genuine, real. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine. Every chair filled with respect and recognition, not obligation. Then, just before midnight, my phone buzzed. A single photo from my brother. One empty chair at my parents' table. No caption, just space. I didn't gloat. I didn't reply. I didn't need to, because the moment wasn't about him. It was about me, about choosing my peace, my standards, my life on my terms. That night, I understood something profound. The real power isn't in reclaiming someone else's validation. It's in no longer needing it. Sometimes the strongest move isn't taking back a seat at the table. It's building a new table, deciding who deserves to sit there and what values it represents. I realized that leverage isn't just about professional control. It's about emotional sovereignty, about defining your boundaries and honoring them, even when the people you love, or once loved, don't. My parents didn't see it. My brother didn't see it. And that was fine, because the growth, the preparation, and the authority weren't dependent on them. They were mine, fully and completely. And here's a kicker. Power feels different when it isn't about proving anyone wrong. It feels quiet, controlled, and utterly freeing. It's the kind of freedom you can't fake. You can't borrow it. You can't demand it. You earn it, day by day, choice by choice, decision by decision. So if you find yourself in a room where you feel invisible, where people minimize your efforts, where you are expected to keep the peace, remember this. You don't need revenge. You need leverage. You don't need their approval. You need your own preparation. And when the moment comes, when reality collides with expectation, you don't have to yell, explain, or fight. You simply let the truth operate in its own time. And in that silence, in that quiet authority, you find something far more powerful than validation. Respect. Not forced respect, not borrowed respect. Real, earned, undeniable respect. That night, as my own table laughed and my phone showed the empty chair across town, I realized I had finally arrived. Not at someone else's table, but at my own. And the peace I had once sacrificed, I had claimed it on my own terms.
Weeks later, I still thought about that empty chair. Not with bitterness, but with clarity. That one photograph wasn't a reminder of exclusion. It was proof. Proof that I had broken free from the invisible role I had been assigned for years. For decades, families tell stories. They assign roles. The responsible one, the golden child, the peacemaker. And if you're not careful, you start playing that part, repeating it quietly, unnoticed, almost invisible. That's what had happened to me. Nobody had yelled. Nobody had disowned me. They didn't need to. They just smiled and whispered, "Can you keep the peace this year?" That line, repeated for years, was subtle, slow, and insidious. It minimized me, made me small, allowed others to grow without questioning the cost. But here's the thing. Invisibility can become power. If you're willing to wait, to work, and to prepare while everyone else assumes you're harmless. I had spent those years building Bridgepoint Capital from scratch. I had risked credit cards, late nights, rejection after rejection from investors who didn't see what I saw. I had built teams, clients, and systems. I had grown into a CEO, not because I was loud, dramatic, or vengeful, but because I chose discipline over approval and preparation over performance. When my brother walked into my office for that interview, I realized something essential. Power isn't about revenge, it's about leverage. Leverage doesn't scream, it doesn't demand attention. It quietly sets the rules of the game. And when reality finally meets expectation, the impact is unavoidable. Some people will ask me why I didn't humiliate him, why I didn't punish him or throw my authority in his face. The answer is simple. I had nothing to prove to him. The lesson was not in punishment, it was in accountability. Growth never comes from being rescued. It comes from being confronted with the truth and given the tools to meet it. That's a lesson I've carried into every part of my life, professional, personal, and relational. Because here's what I realize about people, especially those who rely on family ties or social expectation to protect them. Confidence without competence is fragile. Charm without preparation is fleeting. And shortcuts disguised as family loyalty rarely lead anywhere but stagnation. I built my table. I chose my guests. I selected people who respected my presence without me shrinking to make them comfortable. And when the image of that empty chair appeared on my phone that New Year's, I didn't see it as victory over my family or my brother. I saw it as confirmation that I had finally mastered the one thing they could never give me: autonomy. Autonomy is power disguised as peace. It's the ability to decide who belongs in your life and on what terms. It's the calm knowledge that you no longer need to fight for recognition because you've earned it, quietly, steadily, and irreversibly. And this is the part I want you to carry with you. Sometimes the strongest move isn't confronting someone, proving a point, or reclaiming a seat at a table that made you invisible. Sometimes the strongest move is building a new table entirely. What would happen if you stopped asking permission? If you stopped shrinking yourself to keep others comfortable? What could you achieve if your efforts were dedicated to growth, not approval? This isn't about revenge. It's about preparation. It's about making your work, your presence, and your life undeniable, so that when the moment arrives, the results speak louder than any argument, lecture, or confrontation ever could. So when you feel invisible, minimized, or undervalued, whether in your family, your workplace, or your social circles, ask yourself, am I reacting or am I preparing? Am I shrinking to make others comfortable, or am I building my own space? Do I need permission, or can I create my own table? Because the truth is, most people never realize the cost of their shortcuts. Most families never notice the quiet dedication that grows in the background. Most people wait for applause, recognition, or confrontation. But life rewards the ones who work silently, consistently, and without expectation. When my brother finally joined the team, he did so with a chance, not a gift. He earned it, and that made him better than if I had handed him everything. That's the essence of leverage. It creates opportunity, enforces accountability, and teaches lessons no amount of anger could. The empty chair isn't a symbol of exclusion. It's a reminder of choice. My choice to define my value, my choice to set boundaries, my choice to build my own table with people who deserve to sit at it. And that, more than anything, is the piece I had been asked to keep all those years ago. The real power doesn't come from proving them wrong. It comes from no longer needing their validation. It comes from stepping into your authority quietly, consistently, and confidently.
So if you've ever been told to keep the peace, to minimize yourself, to play a small role for the comfort of others, remember this. Peace isn't about invisibility. Peace is about mastery. Mastery over yourself, your actions, and the space you inhabit. And when you claim that mastery, when you finally build your own table, you'll realize something profound. The world doesn't need to recognize your value. You already do. So I ask you, if you were in my place, would you return to the old table and hope for recognition? Or would you build your own, invite the people who truly matter, and define your own peace? Because in the end, power isn't about control over others. It's about control over yourself. And that is a freedom no one can take away.